Hi. How's it going? It's good to see you guys. I've missed you. Yeah. It's nice to be seen. We're having lots of good seeing experiences here. That's good. We're going back and forth. But welcome to North Shore, and thank you for being here today, especially those of you who maybe are new around this place. I'm very excited to kind of get back in and get a chance to teach in the series we've been doing through the summer called Greatest Stories Ever Told. But before I get into that, I want to kind of give you a quick update on a little bit of my world and life and all those kinds of things, if that's okay. And even if it's not, I'm going to do it anyway. So as I said, those of you who are new, welcome. My name is Jonathan Wolfgang, and I'm one of the pastors here on staff. And many of you probably know, but just in case you don't, over the last several months, since April, we have been looking for a new senior pastor at North Shore. And many of you probably also know that I had expressed a desire to be in that role and applied for the position, thrown my proverbial hat in the ring, as it were. And what you probably also know, either through the letter that you saw or online or maybe heard through the grapevine, is that it was decided that I will not be the next senior pastor at North Shore. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty disappointed about that. And I'd gotten pretty excited about the idea of getting to serve in this way, and have loved the 6 years that I've served here at North Shore, and love this church. We have an incredible staff, incredibly gifted staff that I love serving alongside and consider some of my best friends in the world. And I have come to know and love so many people here. Love them deeply. Not everybody, but many, many, many people. Many. Yeah, many. I'll say many. And we love this church. This is where we give. This is where we worship. This is where my family and I, including my teenage kids or preteen kids, are learning to serve and follow Jesus and being molded into who Jesus wants them to become. We love North Shore, and it is not a perfect church. I don't think that's going to be a revelation to anybody. If it is, you're not going to find one, okay? And even more that I believe there's so much good here, I believe there's even brighter days ahead. And so when I heard, no, you're not the guy, that was sort of hard, as you can probably imagine. Some of you have been through the sort of thing. And a little side note here, I've found, having grown up in church circles and things, churches tend not to handle disappointment and awkwardness and those kinds of things terribly well. They tend to sort of slap on plastic smiles. And anybody else ever seen that? Yeah, that happens sometimes. Yeah, there's lots of hands going up. Yeah, I'm with you, man, I'm with you. I don't understand that. I think that's a shame. Because if there's anywhere in the world we shouldn't have to pretend, it should be here, right? Or we can just be what's up. And I pretended for a long time spiritually. I was kind of good at it. And there are a few things now in my life that I hate more than pretending. So I've been working through it. But here's the deal. I still love this church, and I'm still excited to be part of what God's doing here. And lots of people have asked, so I'll just address it right up front. We have no plans to leave, and we're... You're cutting into my time. I got a time clock. So, but thank you. Anyway, we're continuing to pray hard for those that are involved in this decision process, and praying hard for whoever is that next senior pastor. And for the last 6 years, I did my very best to help support and partner with the previous senior pastor, and any way I could. It was an honor and a joy to get to do it, and it is my hope and my commitment to do my very best to help support and partner with whoever the new senior pastor turns out to be. And I'm committed and excited to figure out how to make that work. And I hope you are too. So let me just say a last two things before we dive into this incredible story. The first is thank you. Your encouragement, even in that moment, means more to me than you can understand. And the notes and emails and those kinds of things that you've sent me and said in the hall, that has meant a lot to me. I'm going to pull it together here in a minute. We'll move on. It means more than you could ever know. There are just no words. I like to think I'm able to express myself fairly well, but all I can come up with is thank you. And the second is this: I hope that you will join me in continuing to support and pray for this search process. It's a big deal. And for this new senior pastor. And I am as eager as anybody to see who that's going to be, and excited to get to team up in our mission to help people find and follow him. Because here's the deal: regardless of who is in what role on what team, there is one thing that is more important than any of this. Now, I look around this area and I just am overwhelmed by the amount of spiritual need and the amount of spiritual confusion and the amount of spiritual blindness and brokenness. And I just so deeply believe the only hope and healing is Jesus. And I think God wants to continue to use North Shore in extraordinary ways to help get that message to as many people as possible, both in this community and around the world. And so there is still a lot of work to be done. And I'm excited to continue to be part of that work, and I hope you will be too, okay? So even while the search continues, this work is to be done. So let's get to work. Can we do that now? All right. 2 down, 1 to go, right? So, okay, so if you have a Bible, I want to ask you to turn to Luke chapter 12. And if you don't have a Bible, the best thing you could do in my life is come ask me for one after service, all right? Because I'd love to give you one. We have a couple of them over here, a couple different translations, some that are easier to understand than others, but I want to try to help you get your hands on a Bible you can begin to interact with, because there's something powerful about spending time in this book. And I'd even love to help you see where to start and how to get going on that. So you can do it on your phone if you have a regular Bible, whatever. But we're going to go to Luke 12, okay, and take a look at another one of these great stories. Because I already mentioned we're in this series called The Greatest Stories Ever Told. And we're looking at the parables of Jesus. These incredible little stories that Jesus used to implant truth in people without them knowing it sometimes. And we said this earlier in the series, a parable is a little story that teaches a big idea. And very often, Jesus, in a sort of stealthy way, this is very ninja-like of him, all right? He would sneak in behind people's defenses, and he would deposit explosive truths in their hearts before they even know what had hit them. The story we're going to look at today is one of those TNT-packed stories, all right? And so I'm glad you're here to be part of it. And this one is particularly tricky because it's one of the easiest for us to ignore, and yet it probably more directly speaks to most of our experience as much as, or if not more, than any of the others that we'll talk about in this series. Okay, so Luke 12 opens, and Jesus has been teaching. And he does this often. He's talking about some pretty heavy stuff. He's pointing out hypocrisy in a lot of the religious leaders who are more concerned about position and piety and impressing everybody else. Jesus says he knows what's underneath. God knows what's underneath, and the truth will out, Jesus says. And then he starts to talk a bit about heaven and hell. He begins to talk about what it looks like to acknowledge him and the importance of doing that with our lives. He's talking about some very heavy stuff. And then it seems as though he's got a heckler. He's got someone who wants to ask him a question, and so he seems to insert himself in this moment. In Luke chapter 12, verse 13, it says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." So Jesus is talking about all this heavy stuff, and this guy in the front apparently raises his hand. He says, "Jesus, that's all very interesting. I have something important I need to ask you about. How can I get more money?" You see, I want more, Jesus, and I'm here so you'll help me get it. No one ever comes to Jesus for that, right? Maybe sometimes. I want more, Jesus, and I want you to help me get it. If I'm honest, in my spiritual life, that's been my spiritual story at times in my life. Jesus, all this stuff you're talking about, that's all wonderful, very touching, moving, that's catchy, I like that phrase. But actually what I'm here to do is let you know what I want because I'm hoping you'll give it to me. Friends, as you grow in learning to follow Jesus, you begin to discover life isn't just about bringing this list and hoping he gives it. It's actually coming at it from a whole different direction. What do you want, God? What do you want, God? I've been asking that a lot. What do you want, God? Anyway, this guy comes on the scene, and we can piece together a little detail from it. Apparently, there's been a death in the family, and there's some kind of inheritance. And again, people were so primitive back then, they would fight over such things. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Far more civilized now. But it's created some conflict in the family. And instead of these two brothers who have apparently lost a father, we can only guess, instead of these two brothers grieving together, what are they doing? They're kind of lawyering up. They're arguing about who gets what. And so Jesus responds in verse 14. Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Jesus says basically, I'm not interested. This is the wrong debate. I'm not getting involved. And then he does what he is so brilliant at doing. Jesus has very little patience for the surface issues. His goal is always to go to the heart, to the root. And that's exactly what he does. Verse 15. Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And these guys hearing this say, wait, who said anything about greed? This is about fairness. This is about earning. This is about getting what I deserve. This is about getting what's mine. In fact, my brother is the greedy one. In fact, I wish he was here to hear you say that, Jesus. You know, that kind of thing, right? I just want what's mine. But Jesus knows there's more going on. He always knows there's more going on. And his primary concern is always what's beneath the surface. And so he calls something out that we sometimes can see in the lives of others, but we often really struggle to see in ourselves, and it's greed. I've just found in my own life and the people that I know, greed is almost impossible to see in the mirror. Now, if you ask people to put together a list of some greedy people they know, they're glad to tell you, right? You probably have a list in your mind right now. But chances are, most of us would not include on that list us. Somebody else, right? Somebody else. Greed is almost impossible to see in the mirror. We say things like, "I'm careful with my money. I'm a planner. I'm a good steward." Good churchy word there. And so Jesus kicks into story mode, and he tells a story that redefines greed, that redefines what it means to be rich, and ultimately redefines the success of life. He tells them a parable. Verse 16, it starts. And Jesus told them this parable. "The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.'" Now, before we get any farther into this story, I just want to acknowledge we are at a very dangerous moment in this message. Because here's what may happen. As you begin to hear us talk about things like greed or about being rich, your brain will naturally drift to other people you know who you think need to hear this talk. All right? Because we don't see ourselves this way. We don't see ourselves as greedy. Certainly not. Who, me? Rich? Do you know how much I struggle month to month? Are you kidding me? Very few of ourselves consider ourselves rich. Why? Because there's always somebody out there with more, right? Always somebody one or two or however many rungs farther up than us. Those people are rich, man. Not me, because I just don't have as much as them. You probably saw in the news this last week. Thursday, for just a few hours, Bezos passed Gates, right? Or Bezos. I always say his name wrong. He can buy me. He does what he wants, right? I don't care, right? He beat Gates for the title of richest man in the world. There was a little surge in the Amazon stock price, and as such, Jeff beat out Bill for just a little while, and then things sort of settled back down, and well, who knows? It'll be interesting to watch that back and forth. But when we think of rich, we think of people like that, right? So Jesus must not be talking to me in this passage. This one's for Mercer Island. This is a Queen Anne talk. This is not a come on, we're Bothell, we're Kirkland, you know? But friends, we've talked about this before. Compared to the rest of the world, compared to the rest of human history, we are among the richest people who have ever lived. This parable's for us. And I know there are some people that are here who are struggling to get by. I'm not trying to minimize that at all. And you know, every year, we give away hundreds of thousands of dollars to people right in our immediate community who are struggling financially through our Compassion Fund. And yet, compared to the rest of the world, 99% of us are among the richest people on the planet. But we don't think of ourselves that way. And because of that, we are just as vulnerable to make the same mistake that this guy is making in Jesus' parable. See, this guy has extra. And so do most of us. We don't think we have extra because we feel stressed financially. But we do. Not sure about that? Let me ask you a few questions. Did you ever go out to eat? You have extra. Do you have cable or satellite or ever go to a movie once in a while? And you say, oh, come on, Wolfgang, you're talking about, I got to entertain myself somehow. But let's be honest. You can survive a long time without going to a movie, can't you? You're not going to get sick or die. No parts of your body are going to fall off, you know, if you don't get to AMC or whatever. All entertainment, let's be honest, it's extra. If you have 2 cars, extra. If you have seasonal wardrobes, meaning when it's like this outside, you bring certain boxes out of their little house where they live, and you wear those, and then you put your cold or wet weather clothes in their house, and they just stay in there. They sit in there for months in their own little house. And then when you need them again, they are resurrected, right? If you have that sort of, you have extra. If you have special clothes that you sleep in, or work in, or exercise in, or relax in, or play sports in, or go out in. Think about it. Most of us, without even trying, we wouldn't even have to be going out of our way. We could very easily wear more outfits in a single day than most people own in their entire lives. It's extra. If the last time you got a new phone, it was not because it broke or because it was lost, but simply because it wasn't the newest, or the latest, or the coolest. You upgraded. You have extra. And let me be clear here. This is not a guilt thing. I'm not saying we should all be running around with iPhone 4s. Okay, that's not what I'm saying, right? I'm just trying to bring some perspective into this conversation, okay? It's not a guilt thing. It's a perspective thing. And honestly, we live lives, even the rich guy in this parable would never dream of the luxuries we have every day of our lives. I am so rich, I not only have a house for my family, I have a house for my cars. Only problem is, I can't park my cars in their little house. They have to sit out on that paved driveway and suffer in the elements, right? Those poor guys. So I pay extra for little rainbow foamy stuff at the car wash because I'm trying to make them feel better about that. You know what I'm talking about, right? But why can't I park my cars in their little house? Because of all my extra stuff. It's full. In my house is a toilet. Actually, I have 3. A little throne in my house where my wife and I sit as king or queen. And we have this magical little lever that whisks away any unpleasantness from our presence. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Friends, we're rich. Almost all of us have extra. And Jesus wants to talk with us about our extra. Because Jesus says there's a foolish way to handle this extra, and then there's a wise way to handle it. And this parable asks a question that most of us never slow down long enough to actually ask. Jesus challenges us to ask it. Why do we have so much extra? Now, maybe you've asked yourself at some time, why do I have so much? Maybe you've gone on one of our global teams that have seen how most of the world lives, or you've seen something on TV and you just realize, my goodness, my standard of living is just, there's no comparison whatsoever. Maybe you even feel a little guilty. Why do I have more than so many people? But most of us never ask why we have so much more or so much extra. So to be clear, there is not anything wrong with saving for the future, right? The Bible is full of encouragements not to live under the burden of debt, to plan wisely for our future, but that is not what this parable is about. This parable is about our understanding of the purpose of stuff, our extra. And it's about a new definition of success. So you see, back in verse 17, if you still got your Bible open, this guy's faced with extra, and what does he say? What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. To which all the people who were listening in Jesus' day would have said, oh, poor guy, right? Oh, poor baby. Oh. How are you going to do it? But to this guy, this is urgent. What am I going to do with all this extra? And in Jesus' day, they would have been following this story, and they would have been thinking, wait a second. The reason you have extra is because God blessed you. Your land, your crops, the rains, those are things beyond your control. You might have been a really good farmer. You might work really hard. But so much of your success, if you're honest at the end of the day, is a lot of factors that are out of your control. So even if you worked hard, so much of what you have is factors beyond you. They would have realized that it was God who blessed him with this extra. But before this guy gives any of that a whole lot of thought, he's already come up with the plan in Jesus' story. Verse 18 it says, then he said, this is what I'll do, Eureka! I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. This guy's thinking ahead. And maybe there are some in Jesus' day, and maybe there are some here this morning who think, you know what, I wish I was that guy. That's a good life right there. Way to go, man. I wish God would bless me like that. That's why I keep coming to Jesus. Verse 19. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, be merry. And here this guy makes the assumption that most of us as Americans make. We assume that if we have extra, it's for me. If God's blessed me with extra, it's ours to consume however we want. And we don't build bigger barns, we just get better cars. We upgrade, we trade up. We don't get bigger barns, we buy nicer houses. Because if I have extra, it must be for me. It's what most people assume. Maybe it's what you assume. Jesus messes with us. And then Jesus says, just only he can. He brings the twist in the story. Verse 20. But God says to this man, you fool. You fool? He's not a fool for being wealthy. That's not his fault that he has extra. But God says, you fool. Why is he a fool? Because he thought all that extra was for him. God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And the answer to that question is obvious. What is it? Somebody else. Why? Not because you shared, not because you were generous, but because you're dead. Everybody leaves it. It goes to someone else. Universal law. Not because he gave it, but because he kicked it. And Jesus looks at this man with extra and he says, you fool, you thought the extra was for you. Now who's going to get the extra? Somebody else. Not because you shared it, but because you kicked it. And then Jesus does something a little unusual. Very often in his parables, he doesn't decode it for his listeners, but in this case, he makes the meaning explicit. Verse 21. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. You see, in this, Jesus introduces an entirely new definition of success, and it flies in the face of what most of us think and how most of us live. And he confronts this thinking with a radical story about the purpose and value of stuff. You remember how he started the story back in verse 15? What did he say? Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. We look at somebody like this rich guy in the story and we think he's to be envied. He's to be imitated. I want that kind of success. But Jesus looks at this guy in the story and he says he should be pitied. Because all he had, it's amounted to a net loss, a total loss. Now, is it a sin to make money? No. Is it a sin to have nice things? No. The problem is, who do we think this extra is ultimately for? You just look back over the story, see the kinds of things that this guy says. I, my, through the story. Jesus says, in this life that I'm inviting you to, you will experience blessing, but don't be fooled into thinking that that blessing is all about you. I will put things in your life because I intend you to share them with others who don't have. And if you miss that, you'll miss what matters. You understand there's a wise way to handle blessing, and there's a foolish way to handle it. So how are you handling your extra? There's a way that will result in a level of joy and fulfillment and purpose so profound, I can't describe it to you unless you experience it yourself. And then there's a way that we can use it that will amount to a total loss, total waste. Jesus is challenging us to do a radically different thing, a radically different attitude toward our stuff, a radically different definition of success. Not how much we have and what we do with it for ourselves, but how much we use it to make a difference in the lives of others. And I'll acknowledge the implications of this are so countercultural, so radical that it's uncomfortable. It raises questions we're not sure how to answer. It stirs feelings in us we're not sure we like. In fact, maybe you're new here and you're thinking, I thought I liked that Wolfgang guy. I'm not sure I do so much anymore. I'm kind of glad he didn't get that senior pastor thing, right? It's all right, you're not the only one. You're not the only one, all right? All I know is this is what Jesus said. In some sense, take it or leave it. But if you claim to care, then we all have some things to think about. And I've just found there's no better way than Jesus' way. I'll just tell you in my experience, so many times when I've sought out, how should I handle this situation, Lord? What would you have me do? The sense that I get from reading in the Bible and talking with friends and prayerfully reflecting on what's the right course, the times I've followed the guidance that I have found taught in this book, it hasn't always been easy, but I'm always glad I did. But can I tell you the flip side? Can I tell you there have been times when the cost was too high? I didn't like what it said. It didn't go the way I wanted it to go. It didn't scratch the itch that I had. And so I ignored it. And every one of those times I've come to regret that. So what do? So countercultural, so against our natural inclinations and the way our whole world is set up. How do we learn to do this? You practice. There's nothing magic about it. You practice. And how do you practice? You practice by being generous. Not just in kind of like knee-jerk sorts of guilt-driven ways. Ooh, yeah, that guy looks really like in trouble, I'll slip him. Priority, percentage first. Lord, this is yours. And then if you want more, let me know. Training ourselves so our first impulse when more comes is not to automatically adjust our lifestyle up to the new standard, but to say, wait, God, you just created margin. Thank you. What do you want to do with it? How should I use it? There's no simple answers here, friends. But if you're not wrestling with these questions, you're not paying attention. So you practice. Because our world hears a story like this and says, this guy's a role model. And Jesus tells us this story and says, this guy's a fool. So which definition of success are you really pursuing? And it isn't just with our stuff. It's with all that we are. It's with our time. It's with the abilities that we have. So many gifted people in this place. Our strength. That's why we do so many kinds of things throughout the year to try to help train us in this kind of generosity. It's why we're doing Community Serve Day, for instance. Many of you know, coming up 3 weeks from today, we set aside a Sunday where instead of doing our normal service experiences in here, we unleash North Shore to serve in our community. We team up with several other churches in the area, and we serve our community in very practical, tangible ways. And the impact of those very simple acts of service make a difference not only in our lives, because we're learning to be generous, but even in the lives of a world that's often cynical about people who talk a great game but don't actually share in the way that Jesus has shared with us. So we talked with a couple people from the district who have seen the difference that these 4 hours can make on a Sunday, and we asked them to tell us just a little bit about that, and so take a look at the screen.
Community Serve Day is an amazing outreach program where community members and churches organize volunteers for our school to help us prepare for the opening of school.
There are a host of people leveling books. They're cutting things out. They're labeling folders.
We have people who are out there weeding, who are trimming, who are pruning.
The extra effort really is a blessing, and it's humbling to us to see that, okay, people already pay their taxes and now they're coming in and helping out.
The impact lasts, and so you will all go away and the kids will come and they're going to see the new tic-tac-toe, and we're going to have an opportunity to teach them how to play something new.
Seeing the people come in and work, everybody's happy, everybody's friendly, everybody, it's like one big family.
So I don't know if you saw that. Some incredible things happen. I mean, we found a couple kids in a dumpster. Did you see that in the video? That was amazing. They've been missing all summer. We found them. Anyway. Incredible stuff. Some of you missed that. You'll have to watch the video online. It's kind of a funny thing to think about, but anyway. We do this for a lot of reasons. Part of it is because we need to practice. Because we've got a God who's been so ridiculously generous with us, not just in all this extra that we have, but far more significant. This God who the Bible says gave his son out of a passion, a love for us, even in our imperfections, even in our struggles, even in our weakness, even in our sin, was willing to leave the affluence of heaven, because heaven's in a pretty nice neighborhood, and is willing to come and live among us and to teach us about this whole new way of life, and to not only talk about it, to back it up with his life. And now he invites us to do the same. He gave his life for us, we give our lives for him. It's just a simple creed of a Christian. But it's more than just that. As churches link arms in the community, it sends a message. We can get along. Instead of holding services in this room, we become servants in the community. Instead of coming here with our worship and our offerings, we go worship in classrooms and by pulling weeds and by helping put in bulletin boards and sort books. All ages, all levels of physical ability, all over the map, being an offering simply by blessing our schools. And instead of coming and listening to a message, we get to go be the message, show the message, live the message. That we live for a different definition of success. And on beautiful sunny weekends when many others are plotting what they're going to do for fun, we're saying, how can we use some of that time to make a difference in Jesus' name? And so I'm unapologetically challenging every person who considers North Shore home to be part of this day. To move your schedule to be part of it if you can. So that we can be part of this incredible experience. And it doesn't matter, as I said, if you're young or old, if you have kids or you don't. Our goal is to have everyone who calls North Shore home serve. And so, on your chair, you saw one of these cards. Grab it if you haven't already. Everyone grab one. And maybe some of you sign up online at communityserveday.org. You can do that online. Or you can fill this out and just get it done right now. You fill that out in a moment if you haven't already. And you're going to see up on the screen here, we've got a map that shows where the different schools are. Those of you who aren't tuned into this. This year we're partnering with 25 schools, guys. That's incredible. 25 schools in Lake Washington and North Shore school districts. The church is kind of down there in the bottom corner there, you see, right above the 9 off of 405. Figure out what's close to you, and if you don't care where you go, if you're willing to go to any of those places, just mark where it's needed most, because some have a little more densely populated areas than others. We could use your help. Fill that out. You write down if you're part of a small group, what a great way to serve as a group. For my kids, I've got kids that are now 13, 12, and 10. They love being part of this, and we do it as a family. Write down your kids' information, because they can sure help too. If you've got any special skills or even limitations on things down at the bottom, you can fill that out. And here's what's going to happen. The band's going to come out, and they're going to play a little bit of form filling out music, all right? There's a soundtrack. And then, after they've finished playing a bit and you filled those out, when we begin to sing, ushers will come, and as we worship with our songs, we'll also worship by offering our lives to say, God, I'll serve this way. And those of us who came to give today in our offering, you can also do that. And if you're here as a guest, please don't feel any pressure to give. We'd love to have you serve with us. I hope you'll do that. But if you don't want to put anything in the plates other than that, that's totally cool. If you want to be part of it, you can. But I encourage you to begin practicing. Learn this. Discover what it is that Jesus is talking about when he tells this life-changing story. So I'm going to have the band come out while I pray, give you a few minutes to fill out that card, and then we'll worship and give. So let me pray. God, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for challenging us to a whole different set of priorities, a whole different kind of life. Thank you for being gracious with us, because our default setting is to assume that the extra must just be for us. And so we thank you for graciously being patient with us when we sometimes forget and slip into what you call foolishness. Grow our hearts more like yours, Lord. Train us in this. Give us hearts that leap at opportunities like Community Serve Day or other chances to give and be generous and to share what it is we have financially or time or energy, whatever. Lord, this is one of the most generous churches I've ever seen. And yet my brain still can't help but wonder, what if? What if we went even a bit further? What if we trusted even a bit more? What if we found a little more extra we could share? What could you do if all of us made this our rule of life? Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. I thank you. You ridiculously generous God, you. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.